if right now there was, like an alien invasion, and the only way we could face them was to build an AI capable of defending humanity, yes, that's where the real problems become, because we can create. Right now, recognition is becoming better and better, and recognizing someone's face, that's dangerous. But recognizing someone's face at 3 kilometers.
Thanks for joining us again. Today we have Daniel Vila Boa with us at the new Nova campus. Daniel, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here.
So, you've donated to the campus and you're really involved in young entrepreneurship and engineering with the young Portuguese students. Why have you decided to get so involved and help out so much?
Well, Nova in particular, I think is it's because it's very likely that one of my kids will come here, because I live in Cascais, and Nova is probably going to be a first choice for at least one of them, but it's a long road to go. But besides that, I think Portugal in general, it's a great place to be.
For those that don't know, Daniel came over from South Africa and you moved to Portugal when you were about?
Yeah, so I came when I was around 14. At the time, I didn't really know a lot of people, and coming from South Africa, the fun part was that there was a lot of South Africans coming at the same time. So I decided to create a social network for South African people also living here in Portugal. Basically, that's kind of how it started in terms of my entrepreneurial journey, you could say.
Yeah. Tell me about the social network that you started. When we last spoke, you were telling me that, it was like one of the first, and Facebook was also coming up and they were doing this land grab kind of thing.
So at the time, the South African social network, that grew to become quite popular in Portugal. I was pretty young, so I'd be invited to the embassy events where we have to be eating while we're standing. It's just kind of difficult when you have boerewors. It's hard to do it with just a fork. But basically, after that, I realized that the community here in Portugal, or the youngsters here in Portugal, they didn't really have a social network at the time. So this was even before Facebook came to Portugal. So after building the South African social network that had photos and profiles, etc., I decided to use the same model and build a social network for Portuguese people living here in Portugal. Okay, so that social network grew to become the biggest in the country. At the time, I was approached by a few companies, but one of them was Grupo Empresa, which is the biggest media group here in Portugal. So they're owners of SIC, it's a television station, and they also do magazines, and they have some of the most popular newspapers. So I ended up selling 51%, 51%, a good Portuguese twist, 51% of the company to Grupo Empresa. And then I stayed there for 3 years and I bought the company back. So, and I think in terms of Portugal, that's probably the most interesting part, is that when I bought the company back, I actually went to IKEA, and I bought this massive poster of Golden Gate Bridge. Okay, so it's about 3 meters wide. I still have it. And I put it behind my computer at my office at home, because I was starting from scratch. I was starting a new business again. So what I learned is that because I launched the social network here in Portugal, that if I'd been in Silicon Valley or in the States, the chances of it being successful would have been much higher. So my big objective is the next company I'm going to build, I'm going to scale it, build it, and I'm going to move to the US. And as time went along, I started realizing that there's a very big difference between the US and Portugal. And the first perspective we have is that there's an ecosystem there and that everything's going to happen there. But then we start realizing there's a lot of barriers that have been removed by the internet. Okay, so right now you can start a business from anywhere in the world. And when we look at the salaries, for example, of an engineer that comes out of Stanford, the difference compared to the salary of someone living here in Portugal is huge. So if you had to have the exact same company here in Portugal and take it to the US, you'd probably need more than 10 times funding. So when I started putting all these things together, the cost of living here in Portugal being much lower, the lifestyle that you can have with a good salary in Portugal being much higher, the fact that we all speak English, like Portugal's a very English country. So like it's not, if you go to Spain or you go to Italy and you speak to someone in English, it takes, or even France, even though France is pretty peculiar, but it takes time. And Portugal, like, it's a very welcoming country. And when I started putting all these things together, and my kids were also being born, I have 3 now, that's when I realized, Portugal actually has everything that you could want to start out a company. So I abandoned, like right now, unless it was like a specific sales team, there is no motive like for me to want to move to the US or to any other country in the world.
Oh, that's quite something. And so the company you started was Net Jovens, right?
Yeah, so Net Jovens was the social network at the time. When we sold, there was a lot of PR around it because there wasn't really a startup scene. I mean, Portugal now, even with the Web Summit, there's a very established startup scene. There's a lot of accelerators. There's a lot of support system. But at the time I sold the company, it was kind of like, this was back in 2007, it was a very new thing. So it wasn't a normal thing for someone to come out of college and, not pursue a typical career and want to start out a business.
Right. And I mean, so Net Jovens, to my knowledge, isn't, really functioning anymore.
Yeah.
Facebook is. And I can imagine that you might know a little bit about Facebook and Mark's story. So could you share with us why you think that Facebook just completely took over and is now by the EU and perhaps even by the US considered like a monopoly?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one because I have Facebook stock, so it's not that I didn't believe in the idea. But I think at the time they did a really, really good job by starting out in some very, very good universities, with a lot of very influential people at a time where internet was still kicking off. The internet itself did exist, but not at the scale of connectivity we have today, which is also because of Facebook itself. But I feel, I think their monopoly is probably more related to the fact that they have various, apps and all of them are right up there in the store. So, the monopoly is going to shift between Amazon, Google, and Facebook, at least for the short time, yeah.
For sure. But you see them as market leaders for
social networks?
Yeah, indefinitely.
Well, if you consider Facebook as Facebook like the holding, the company itself, Instagram and WhatsApp both belong to them. So yeah, we could say, I don't think it's a monopoly. At least I wouldn't like to say it's a monopoly, at least not on the record. But I do feel that they've done an extraordinary job of connecting people together and also a very good job of understanding where it was going. So a lot of companies, usually, and this is across various sectors, when there's a new technology, the people that jump onto those technologies early are the ones that have exponential growth, because technology has exponential growth and they grow with it. And one thing that Facebook failed to do in the beginning was adapt well to mobile. So that was probably one of their biggest mistakes at the time. They try to be cross-platform because they'd bought the company at the time, I think it was FriendFeed. So they try to use HTML, which is web-based technology. So the app was very clunky. Probably you don't remember it, but the app was very clunky. The feeling that you had on it was very slow. And since then, they've created very good technology to put everything on all of the store, all of the different platforms. But the truth is they understood that if they had to lose mobile, like Facebook wouldn't be Facebook today. And that is the truth. I mean, if you go to probably the majority of the students here at Nova and you ask them who uses actively, Facebook or who uses Instagram actively, I even had to change most of my PowerPoints and stuff that I had Facebook because I'd noticed most people like Facebook.
Yeah. Why you transitioned over from Net Jovens and then you moved over to Chilltime?
So Chilltime. So the funny story is that at the time, we wanted to build an international social network. So that was the idea. We wanted to create something that would allow us to compete on an international scale.
With Chilltime. And
Chilltime was the name. So Net Jovens became Chilltime, and Chilltime was going to be the company that would take the social network international. And at the time, we even did a focus group where we took, I think it was like 50 people we invited to a hotel, because the company that's one of the partners are in the stock market. You have to you have to justify the decisions you make. So it was like probably one of the most expensive investments I wouldn't have wanted to do, because it's expensive to get 50 people into a hotel to do a focus group. And at the time, we took a whole bunch of names, it was like 50 names. And in the first group, they basically put people that were users of NetShopping, the people that were users of, at the time, social networks that were competing, high five. And in the study, they would bring up different aspects that they thought were relevant to each of their social networks. And the funny part was, after they finished the list, they would look at all of those components and they would select a group, they would select one of the names from that 50. And the first 25, Chilltime wasn't selected, okay? But since we stopped, even before we started the study, I said, no, Chilltime's like really the name. And it's like, no, we have to make sure that this is the name. We have to do a market study for that. So basically, I spoke to them and I said, okay, listen, I want you to put Chilltime. I want you to put it back into the list of the 25. So we ended up with 26. And the funny part is, when they started putting down the aspects of what we wanted to achieve, is the name recognizable? Is it easy to spell? Does it relate to the product? A lot of the different components that were important at the time, when we put it back onto the list, the second time, like, everyone loved Chilltime. Okay, so I also think there was just too many names, so the study loses its quality. But that was the reason for Chilltime to exist. And then because I had a contract, I had to stay there for 5 years. Kind of when I bought the company, part of the reasons was that I didn't want to stay the 5-year term, because I wanted to start something new. But at the same time, I also wanted to bring Chilltime with me, the name. I think I became a fan of the name. Since then, basically, we launched with all of my knowledge for social networks. And I would say I do like strategy games, okay? But like, if I compare myself to some of the people in the office, I think there's a big difference between, what their knowledge and my knowledge within the area. But I put the two together to create a strategy game. That strategy game we did for about 5 years, which is a long time. It's a cash flow positive company. That was the whole idea of us launching it. But the truth is, after those 5 years, we had, I'm not sure how the news came to me, but I saw this report about the Web Summit, where they were asking for companies or startups to represent Portugal, to be like the representation of Portugal in the Web Summit. And I thought, that's a hell of a stamp, like you want to be one of those startups selected to represent Portugal. And when that happened, I think in that process, we did the application in the beginning, like no one in the office really knew about it. I didn't really take it that serious. And we were selected in the first phase to go to this like pitching competition. And when that happened, that's when I realized, okay, like now we're in this, now it's a real deal that we're going to take this serious. I really want to make sure we're into the top teams. So I think in that process, I started to reach out to a lot of people that were inside my network, or people that in a certain way could help me to perfect my pitch and to perfect everything for my company. And I remember there was even one lunch that I had with a person that's an angel investor. He was actually one of the founders of a Portuguese stock market company. And he was sitting at lunch and he says, like, Daniel, I mean, you were telling me the whole pitch, and then you actually told me that you have sales. And it's like, that's like a massive deal. Like, you need to put that into your pitch, And that's what I did. And we went to the competition. We were one of the startups selected to represent Portugal. And I think since then, my posture before was very home office. I think since then, I've gotten out a lot more. And that's given us the opportunity to work on a lot more interesting projects. So I would say that right now, as a company, Chilltime is no longer a company that builds games, but right now we're a product company, and we have products that are internal and others that we work with other people.
And so when you talked about going to Web Summit and meeting some people, that was when you met Tim Vieta, right?
Yes, that's where I met Tim Vieta. Yes.
He was actually our first guest on the podcast.
It was funny because I remember the first time I met him, we were speaking Portuguese right in the beginning, because I think we're both South African. We don't know how South African, how long a person's been in South Africa. And I remember when I started speaking about my project and I said, we build games, Tim's reaction was like, oh, you're one of those guys. Basically, because, I was like a technology kind of games kind of person. But the truth is, with time, I got to know Tim very well. And above all, I think I'm a product person. I think Tim is also a product person. Tim's a very intelligent person. He's a great person to get along with. And I think our friendship has grown a lot since then. And, we've also done things together that have worked out well. So it's great to have that ecosystem of South Africans here in Portugal too.
And so, you mentioned that you've moved on, not just a game company anymore, which, by the way, I must commend you. I was playing the other day World War Online.
Okay.
Man, it's a good game.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
We've launched it also on iOS and Android. We're launching a second title, a second game, which is going to be casual. Okay, so that's going to be a new experience. It's a good challenge for us.
A few of my friends, they said, if you're having Daniel on, then you've got to ask him if he's played Fortnite.
Yeah, the funny thing is I have. And it's because, my wife, it's a family of 5, okay, so there's a lot of kids. I've kind of had this rule since I was small, which is funny because I have a company that makes games, putting it in that way. I never play games during the week. Okay, and it's still something I'm kind of faithful to today. So I don't really do entertainment during the week. But on Friday nights, not now, but there was a phase where we would basically just switch on TeamSpeak or something, and we put on our headphones, and me and my brother-in-laws, we just play League. We play also League of Legends before. Now League of Legends kind of died out. But we also used to play Fortnite, and the truth is it's a lot of fun. We weren't really good at it, so we never actually won. But I think the entertainment of us just remotely playing on a Friday is just a fun thing to do together, I guess.
Yeah, and so can you give us some insights, because you had experience with gaming and that. Can you give us some insights as to how difficult or how easy it is to build a game like Fortnite? I have no idea. I've played the game. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, wow, it's a good game. The graphics are decent, especially on PC or PlayStation 4. It's amazing. And I have no idea the kind of work that goes into building a game like that. Is that something?
I think there's a very, very big difference building games today compared to when I started. Okay, so when I started building games. I would say there's 2 fundamental differences. One of them is that advertising was much cheaper. Okay, so I remember doing one campaign in Ireland where we got I think it was 300 players, and they were costing us 3 cents per click, 3 cents per register. And if you had to do the same campaign today, it's going to cost you 60 or 50. So it's a really big difference. I think building games or scaling games from a perspective of marketing, so we're talking about the average cost per user and the revenue. If your average cost to acquire a user is higher than your revenue per user, then you have a problem. If it's lower, then you have a gold mine. But it's a lot harder today than it was before to scale up games. At the same time, I think the technology, it's been 10x. Okay, so in terms of building games, Fortnite itself is on top of the Unreal Engine. Okay. So Unreal was, this is probably before your time, but there used to be a game called Unreal Tournament. Yeah, I guess if my kids don't listen to this podcast, I guess I can say this. In 12th grade, I remember there was a time that I was playing Unreal Tournament, okay, much more than I should. And I've always been a fantastic student in South Africa. The funny thing is I used to get I get A+ at everything, except for Afrikaans.
Same, man.
and I think part of the reason why that happened is because my dad was okay with it. He was Afrikaans it's a language it isn't a very big future language right now, simply because the chances of us going to Portugal are very high. I kind of regret it now because my wife is also South African, so Afrikaans it's a handy language to have if we're going to have a private conversation, secret conversation. But at the time, I was playing too much of the game, and it did affect my grade. So I went from a student that was used to having really, really good grades to having difficulty with maths and physics, which are 2 subjects that I love. Okay, and it got to the point where on my last semester, I basically took the computer out of my room because sometimes I'm a bit of a burster, and I took it out of my room and I literally completely just focused head on getting into university. Okay, so there was a phase where I would have extra lessons of a lady that used to live really close to me. I would go have extra lessons, come home and do exercises, and I would do this almost every day for 2 weeks. And when I mean 2 weeks, I studied before, but those 2 weeks was literally just that. I remember getting to her in one of the classes, and she turns to me and she goes like, I was doing the exercise. She goes, Daniel, you really need to stop worrying. You're really, really well prepared. That did happen. So I remember at the time I got 17.5, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember when I left the exam, there was a Escolha Múltipla, which was 2 values. So I would have got 19.5. And I remember walking out the door and I'm like, oh, like I actually remembered what I had done wrong the moment I walked out the door. But that is actually what got me into university. So I think it was that crunch moment where I just decided like that this is an important part of my life and like I could be doing better, and I switched off on everything. And I think that's probably one of the like when I have these moments where I feel like I have to focus, I'll switch off from everything and like give it 100%.
Right. And so you mentioned you're talking about the Unreal Engine and that, and I've actually this is going to sound kind of, but I've applied for an internship at Epic Games.
Okay, so you really like Fortnite?
I do, man. But if you guys have internships, I'll apply as well.
Have you ever won a Fortnite like solo or?
Man. This is on air. I'll tell you off air how many I've won. I don't want to brag.
Okay.
And if my brother's listening, man, I'm way better than him. But
yeah.
But yeah, no. Look.
So I've never won. I almost won once. Okay, where I actually I played. Fortnite is an action-packed game, but it's already a really good run simulator too. So I basically hit practically all of the game until I reached the end. It was just me and another guy. And I threw one of those towers that opens up.
Yeah, Portafoot.
Yeah, and then you can jump up and you can block it, right? And at the time, I'd built a wall before that was only half, but it keeps the configuration of the previous one. So this is like my only moment of glory. And when I put it down, it left a hole. The guy actually jumped up through it. And I died, and I thought like, this is my moment. But unfortunately, I think that's the closest I've ever gotten to winning.
No, it's quite a game.
It's mostly entertainment for me.
Yeah, it is. And so this Unreal Engine, can anybody use it? Or do you have to have like a licensing?
No, you can. I'm not sure about Unreal. For both of the mobile app World War Online that we launched now. We literally launched the native version for iOS and Android last week. The second game we're launching is going to only be mobile, which is the casual game. Which is funny because speaking about Tim, I remember we were in a conversation and I was like, yeah, we build more gladiator kind of games. If you have to look at the movie, we build more gladiator kind of games. But we were looking and we were seeing that a lot of the games that are making money are actually Disney kind of games. And it's a funny thing because since I think it's been a continuous joke since then. And the second one we're launching, I think, is more of a Disney kind of game, and I think it's something that literally will switch on the music. And I have 3 kids, okay, so 7, 5, and 2. And the older ones will come running straight away when they hear the music and they're like, I want to play. And even the little one, which has no idea what's going on, he'll just grab the screen and he'll be like moving things around. He's hearing the noise and he's like with a huge smile on his face. So that's something that, I'm hopeful on. I think it's a very peculiar industry that all we use, the technology we use is Unity. So Unreal, I'm not sure, but Unity, there's different packages, so you can pay for it. But generally, to start out, they always have free versions, so you can try and make your own game, definitely.
All right. So then the hard work comes on the graphic design. What does the engine do?
So when we started building native apps, I bought a course for Unity. It was like $30, and which now you could probably get it cheaper because now there's always discounts coming. And I actually forced myself not to read it because from the experience I'd learned before is when I become very knowledgeable about a technology, the problem is it's very hard for me to resist the temptation to participate in the development process. So in this case in particular, I understand how Unity works and I can go into the code and I can change a lot of the things that are there and I can tweak it, but I made it a point for me to not dedicate myself in terms of the programming wise of the game to avoid that temptation of spending time on things that don't really create a lot more value. So I've been spending most of my time in other areas. To build the assets in terms of Unity, you can go to the store and you can get a lot of free assets. Internally in our team, we have people, that do 3D modeling. We do animation in store. We do digital illustration, which is basically painting on tablets. So yeah, but you can get lots of assets for free.
And what kind of, I think it's kind of like a keyword nowadays, or a buzzword rather, is AI. Have you seen a lot of AI coming into games, and are you guys like planning on getting into AI? Was that like very, very heavy PC games kind of things? Or
AI is it's a very small world. It's like a very small word for a very big collection of things. But like essentially what we're speaking about in AI is having a computer make some sort of a logical decision for something. So in a game, AI can go from having, for example, you going into a scenario and having like computer generated opponents that appear and compete against you. AI can also be, for example, generating levels of a game, like a puzzle game, for example, generating levels based on your skill. Okay, so that can be AI. AI can also be, having the computer make decisions completely on itself, learning from other people. So that's like the component of AI towards machine learning.
And Elon Musk has been, he's really fanatic about gaming, and he thinks it's the most interesting thing ever. And the process that goes into making good games, he says, is like, we have him on record saying, "Oh, you think building rockets is difficult? Well, you should speak to the guys that program these games." What do you think? Because he believes that in the future, if you give any positive like rate of change to the way computer graphics are going and the way AI is developing within games, that given the right amount of time, eventually we'll be able to build a game that is so similar to reality, we wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And so then he draws the conclusion that we're actually in a simulation and we don't know.
He says that there's there's a really, really small probability that we're inside the simulation. And I think, it's not I think it's more of a mathematical or logical viewpoint more than because I think if you understand like a bit of the idea behind it, it's mostly because of the speed that things are progressing, that there's a possibility that because games are so good, and because of the evolution that we've seen until today, there is a possibility that it's evolved so much that right now we ourselves are inside a simulation, okay? And if we're not in a simulation now, we could be in the years to come. So we could be in like the first simulation, we could be in the first situation that's going to lead to a simulation, or we could be in one of the simulations. And I think that's probably mostly the logic behind what he's saying. But, we don't know, like if the simulation is good enough and we can touch and we can feel and we can look at each other and we can communicate and we can hear and, if all of that is possible in a simulation, then theoretically you could create a game that could simulate that. So I think it's more of a logical explanation.
Sure. So you don't believe we're in you and I are having like some sort of game.
I think his logical explanation for it makes sense.
Right.
So it doesn't mean that I necessarily believe that we are or that we aren't. What I think he sees is that it's technologically possible for us to reach that phase. And if it's technologically possible for us to reach that phase, then we won't really be sure if we are in that phase or not now.
AR and VR, you think, does this technology look feasible? Does this look like something that you think consumers be interested in, or is the market not ready for it? What are your thoughts on AR, VR?
So I'm a big fan of the evolution of technology in general. I do feel that we'll probably tend to, or it's possible that we might tend to get to a phase where that's not even relevant, So I do think that's probably an end game. So it's going to be like you're not going to walk around with a phone or put something on your head, or So it'd probably be a combination of various things. I do feel that AR and VR have a lot of value in very, very different fields. I think like if you had to have like a piece of glasses that we have today, and I'm looking and I'm speaking to you right now, and I can that's an easy phone, that's an easy watch to identify. But if I had to have if I had to have an AR component that can look at that and can tell me what that is and tell me how much it's going to cost, and I can buy it right now, I think we're probably going to go in that direction anyway. So I think that's in terms of AR, there'll be a lot of, which I think we're there already. I don't think it's something that we're going to be like long term. I mean, today if you pick up your, you might be an iOS user, but I'm an Android user just because. And I was an iPhone user before. But I mean, you can switch on Google. Has you just say OK Google, and it's got a button you can press, and you point it at practically anything, and it really recognizes. You can be like a hand cream, it can be a shower gel, it can be anything. He'll recognize what it is, what the name is, and where to find it. We're just talking about connecting something that already exists, which is connected, you know, a piece of glass, to technology that it's already working, and you know, you can even pass that on to third parties like Amazon. We'll get to the products. I won't speak exactly about the products we're working on, but one of them has to do with that. So it's probably the first company that I personally invested in. But there's ways to do image recognition through third parties. So Amazon right now has services that can recognize a person's face. If he's famous, he'll tell you who they are. He'll be able to look at an image and see that it's a mom with kids, and he'll tell you that it's child-safe content or likely child-safe content. We can look at a photo and say, you know, this is 90% wildlife, this is 50% gravel roads, this is a 90% chance that this is a bicycle. So, you know, I think we're there. You know, we probably just need someone within that field to build something that becomes a consumer product for us to all realize, you know, okay, this is really physically here. In terms of VR, I think my only reservations with VR for now are probably the physical component itself. You know, the fact that I have to get something and put it on my head, you know, that for me, I think from a consumer perspective, I think it's a lot of work. I don't like now, I think Oculus Rift, they now launched one that's a standalone one. So I do think that's an evolution already. But, you know, like the previous ones of you have to walk around with like a practical laptop on your back. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to have some difficulty to become a full consumer product. Maybe because of that, because we're a bit lazy by nature. But if it's standalone and I can pick it up and just put it on and start playing, but I'm going to have to be like swinging my hands around and stuff.
Look, crazy kind of world we're living in. I mean, it's changing so quickly. I mean, I remember being in the 8th grade and someone was telling me about this crazy technology. You know, you put it on your face like in the sci-fi movies and it works great and you're living it and all that. And, you know, today you can go down to the FNAC, wherever it may be, and just get yourself a pair for like $300 and you have a pretty immersive kind of experience. I've played with one before and the graphics aren't, it's not 4K.
But I think that's the biggest deal is once you can, once we can replicate the vision of a person within VR, that's when it'll become a lot more immersive, probably. You know, so until we reach that phase, like you put on VR right now and you feel you're in the mode, but you'll understand that it's not your crisp. You know, it's not what we're seeing right now. So if we're in a simulation now, they obviously improved the graphics.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that wouldn't make sense. Everyone would have to have beautiful eyesight, perfect eyesight. But I did try a simulation in Técnico. I was invited to, they have a classroom there to try out HTC, which is basically one that you can kind of walk around with. And one of the simulations was to sit down and fly a plane. And while I was flying this plane, I was like dodging the asteroids and stuff. And then I, like, just for fun, I did like a tumble. And when I did the tumble, I did the tumble, but I didn't feel 100%, but I couldn't pinpoint like what it was. Maybe it was like my vision related to the fact that I was using the technology. But then the teacher turned to me and he said, in Portuguese, but he said to me, don't do that too often because you might feel like it might make you sick. And when he said that, I thought, okay, now I really have to try it. So I basically just put the thing doing tumbles. And the truth is, I actually did feel sick. So even being 100% conscious of, the world around me, that, I'm sitting down and this is, it's a simulation and it's not real, my brain felt the need to tell my body that, I was sick. So that for me was actually quite an interesting moment.
That's crazy. And what do you think about AI? Are you worried about, I know we've spoken, about AI in relation to games, but we spoke about Elon Musk, and Elon Musk is, man, he's afraid. He's, he's shit scared of AI.
I think it's,
I mean, you mentioned now the product, it could recognize my watch. what if we could recognize someone's face and you put a gun on that thing?
Yeah, that's what I was going to lead to. So I don't want to dive too deep into it, but I think if you look at it from a product perspective of what can be built, and I think that's probably his biggest concern is people are looking to AI in terms of machine learning and the control that we put on top of it, and the people that are going to be on the steering wheel making those decisions for that technology. But if you look at it from a standpoint of building anything that could be possible, not what you want to build, because I don't think he would want to, like I wouldn't want to. I think if you can put the pieces together and say, like, if right now there was, like an alien invasion, and the only way we could face them was to build an AI capable of defending humanity, yes, that's where the real problems become, because we can create. Right now, recognition is becoming better and better. And recognizing someone's face, that's dangerous. But recognizing someone's face at 3 kilometers, you can already have rifles that shoot at 3 kilometers. So if he can calculate wind and he can do all of those things, I think that's probably the component military-wise where AI can be a danger. I think the other one is on decision making. So if we create, a specific situation, if we create a robot, and he's inside your home and he's protecting you, and he's programmed to protect you, and he's programmed to protect your family, and we have a child and he's taking care of the child, and all of a sudden the dad walks in. Okay, so this is just like a hypothetical situation. Sure. When the dad walks in, let's say that the dad had to, let's say he was like drunk or something like that. If that had to be the case, the computer now has to make a logical decision. If he understands that the dad's posture is going to put the baby in risk, he himself is going to have to make the decision, okay, do I protect the baby and harm the father, or do I let the father harm the baby when my mission is to protect the baby? So I think the machine learning danger is probably as the computer starts to make these own logical decisions, he's going to probably continue defending that baby. And then maybe there's going to be people that walk in with guns to try and stop the machine because they want to get the baby, and then the computer's going to feel they're at risk. So he himself is going to start protecting the baby against those people. So this is something I just thought of now, but I think it's probably these are the very specific situations where you could see AI becoming a danger on these two fronts. So one is the technology is there to make machines that are capable of probably doing things that humans can't do. I mean, you've seen the DARPA robots running and climbing stairs and so forth. And the other one is when the computer starts to make decisions on his own, are those decisions that he makes, are the logical sequence of decisions that he makes, will it lead to a point where it becomes dangerous? And I think that's probably the unpredictable, or maybe the danger of it, Someone's
going to develop AI. I mean, you mentioned he might not want to, but I mean, one of these Soviets, one of these North Korean guys, one of these insurgents, I'm sure that someone's going to develop this. And so do you believe, like I think Elon, the best way would be to disseminate the power as much as possible and to allow everybody to have AI? Like he's working on that neural link thing.
Yeah, I think he's probably trying to anticipate it or to understand it, and because no one really listens to something until it becomes a problem. And I think probably part of the logic behind that is like he has the tools to prove it, and if he has the tools to prove it, I mean, they've put two bots playing against each other in the beginning to try and win a level. They would work cooperatively, and then they started realizing that their chances of winning after a few rounds was to start playing more and more aggressive. And then it got to the point where the computer itself learned that by being aggressive from the beginning, his chances of winning are much higher. So I feel maybe that's part of the logic behind. I don't know. I'm not inside his head. We're different people, but I think part of the logic behind it is to explain that it is a problem. I do think it's something like it's inevitable. So we are going to go in that direction, and there's going to be a point where people are going to be building things like that, and then there's going to be probably a point where we're going to have to build things to protect us from things like that. I don't know. But this could be a 5-year thing, could be a 10-year thing, could be a 15-year thing. I do think that, things do move very, very fast. And if we get the wrong people to spearhead it, we'll get to the nasty side of things faster than the good side. Yeah.
So Daniel, we had Tim on the podcast last time, and he said that, Nova is perhaps, the most modern university in the world right now. What caused you to leave South Africa? I think you were quite young back then. And why have you stayed? Why are you still in Portugal? I mean, have you gone back?
Yeah, I've been back a few times, mostly because I have family there. My sister still lives in South Africa. She lived here for a while in Portugal, and then she actually went back to marry her true love before she left. So now I have a nephew. So the chances are she might actually be going to Australia. But the truth is I have been back a few times. But when I came to Portugal at the age of 14, I actually just wanted to be a soccer player. That was probably one of our main motivations. And I did end up playing like first league here in Portugal.
Oh, really?
In Alverca, yeah. Then the best thing that could have happened to me, I twisted my foot twice. Got operated, so literally, probably best to not say it on the podcast, but it kind of ended my sport career.
Your aspirations.
But it gave me the opportunity to dedicate a lot more time to something that, like, I'm really, really happy that I had this opportunity to get into fields that are so interesting, and it just keeps on getting more interesting. You can do so much with these tools, in terms of technology in all fields.
And you were at Queen's. You studied.
Yeah, I
Queen's.
studied in Queen's High.
Shout out to Queen's.
Actually, I only did 1 year in Queen's, unfortunately. So that's the year I left South Africa.
Oh, my uncle went to Queen's.
You went to Queen's?
Yeah,
as well.
man,
Yeah. So I went to Queen's. I studied in Eastgate Primary. Yeah. So Eastgate Primary, then I went to Queen's, and then I passed from 8th grade South Africa to 8th grade in Portugal. So, in the transition, there was like, today I don't think it's like that anymore, but I lost that year of equivalence. Yeah.
And then you moved to Portugal, you studied here, like you said, 8th grade and all that, and then Técnico. Tell me about Técnico. I mean, Técnico, we have a family friend, and he's an engineer, and he went over to Canada, and he was thinking of sending his son there to the university to study engineering in Canada. The professor there said, but you're Portuguese, right? He's like, yeah. So he's like, send him to Técnico, man. Técnico is just where it is. And, Técnico, I know a lot of people that work, I know someone that works at Boeing, someone works at the Japanese Space Agency from Técnico. So you guys have all these, incredible engineers coming out of there. What's the secret recipe?
Yeah, so our company, Chilltime itself, belongs to the spin-off community of Técnico. So basically, it's a collection of companies. It's a collection of companies that had students that built companies, and they use it to set the example for entrepreneurship within the university. And there's one thing that the president Erlindo of Técnico said was that, which for me just like showed a lot of, I think he's an amazing person and shows that he has like a humble viewpoint, a very logical viewpoint. Is, the first thing he said is like, on the inauguration where we won the certificate, the chances are if you had to probably go to some other university or do something else, the chances are, maybe with a little different of an outcome, you probably would have reached the same point. So what he was trying to say is that the fact that you had this entrepreneurial spirit did kind of, it would lead you to want to build a company anyway. And maybe if you had gone to another university, that still would have happened. Now, what I do think happens in Técnico in particular is that your raw materials in Técnico are just so extraordinary. Because it's like a first choice university for people that come out, like just the probability of great students coming out of Técnico is just so much higher. If you're going to get the 150 best students that chose the computer and engineering, like the average now is like, I think it's one of the top 5 courses in Portugal. It's like, I don't know if it passed medicine already.
Yeah, I saw it the other day.
It's huge. Actually, Técnico, the top 4 courses this year to get into that had the highest grades were 3 courses from Técnico and 1 from Universidade in Madeira. And it turns out the funny part is, and I know Erlindo actually posted this, and Luis, which also is part of the career services there at Técnico, is that student at the University in Madeira was actually a student that came from Venezuela that was studying in Técnico, and because he couldn't get his papers for Técnico because Venezuela is in a really bad time now, which is unfortunate because there's a lot of, there's also a lot of people from Madeira that went to Venezuela. He couldn't get the bolsa or
Yeah.
How would you like
the student loan?
The student loan to get into Técnico. So he ended up going into the Madeira University, and he's the only student there, I think, in civil engineering.
So that's how they got it up.
So that's actually how they became top 4, which is funny, which means probably, the top 4 courses have students from Técnico. But I think it's also, I think it's an area that allows you to have a lot of very passionate people. So it's not like the common area to go for. So like if you like computers, you'll go into computers because you're passionate about it. If you go into physics, it's because you love physics. If you go into aerospace, it's because you love aerospace. And when you associate knowledge or students' capability with probably the biggest asset that we can have that isn't technical, which is motivation and the will to learn and the will to do something, I think like they're two magnificent, ingredients. And probably that's why we see so many great people from Técnico doing amazing things around the world.
Definitely. You've donated to Nova. I haven't given you the tour yet, but what are your first impressions? Coming to this new campus, right across the road from the beach. What are your impressions, and what have you heard about Nova that you think South African students should, and students from all over the world should be hearing and know about?
So I feel it wasn't just great, I think, for Nova itself. I think building Nova here was great for the country. I think the campus itself is almost become like an ecosystem that in one certain sense is very it's a tight ecosystem where you'll get along with a lot of people from overseas, but at the same time it's so close to Lisbon and to Cascais that you can be in Lisbon or Cascais, so you can be a part of the startup ecosystem, you can be a part of Cascais, which is a beautiful place to be and to live, but at the same time it's a very international university. So one of the biggest assets later on in life in business is that the network you build while you're at college is going to be a network you're going to help them and they're going to help you later on. And because Nova is such an international university, I think it's 70% of the students are international. The chances are you're going to be getting along and meeting people that are going to work on great companies or going to build great companies. So you might have the opportunity to go and work at phenomenal startups that come out of here, or maybe you will create a phenomenal startup, and while you're at university it's a lot easier. You'll get people to want to jump on board and help you, So I think from a standpoint of entrepreneurship, I think the ingredients of Nova are spectacular. At the same time, Nova is a top university in terms of management in Europe and so in the world. I think it's top 50, as well as Católica. And I think Nova is probably the biggest university that's the highest ranked, well, not probably, it is, in terms of management in Portugal. So if you really want to have an international experience where you're going to create a great network and you're going to have access to fabulous teachers, I think Nova is a great place to be. And part of the reason why I donated is because you start seeing different trends with your kids and what they like. And my older one, I can see she's more of a people person. She understands a lot about what people like and marketing and so forth. And I thought, there's a chance that you're probably going to go into management or go into marketing. So we're really great that one day if she comes to this university that she can walk in and see our family was part of helping to make this happen. Yeah,
look, I speak for myself. It's been a hell of a time here at Nova. Really enjoyed it. And hey, I'm here just to spread the word. It's really been quite an experience. I've done so many things. I've met so many people. South Africa's great, but I just, as much as I love the country, I don't see those things having happened there.
So I think in terms of South Africa, if you have a business in South Africa and you're making a lot of money, I think it is okay to kind of stick around. But if that's not the case, and you're thinking about a long term, Portugal's a great place to build that runway. If you want to create a plane and you want to fly the plane, you want to take off and you want to do extraordinary things, Portugal has all those ingredients. So and there's a lot of ex-South Africans living here in Portugal, and I think that also helps when you come here to feel that there's a support system. So I think that's also a bonus for South Africans in particular.
I've loved it. You seem to have enjoyed it. I think we'll end it off there.
Okay, it was a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thanks, eh?
Thank you.
Thank you.